What if I told you the fate of the entire world wasn't decided on a battlefield, but in some quiet notary's office? Today, we're diving into an absolutely incredible story, a global conspiracy allegedly hidden in the legalese of just one document, World Succession Deed 1400/98. It sounds completely nuts, right? The plot of some wild blockbuster movie. But what if the answer to that question, according to the source material we're exploring, is a hard yes? What if there's a document out there that claims to have done just that, transferred sovereignty over the whole globe? The story goes that on that day, a contract was signed and notarized, and on the surface, it looked totally normal. Totally boring, but supposedly, buried deep inside its clauses was a hidden mechanism designed to trigger a global transfer of power, all of it disguised as a simple property deal. Okay. So how on earth could one little property sale have such massive, world-changing consequences? The whole theory, the whole secret, is baked into the very nature of the deed itself. And here's the core of the alleged deception. On the surface, you've got a standard German real estate contract, a Kaufvertrag, for an old, decommissioned Nato barracks. Nothing to see here. But the claim is that its true identity was a Staatensukzessionsurkunde, a deed of state succession. The whole thing was supposedly engineered to be completely unrecognizable to the average person, and that very much included the guy who bought it. Now, a deed of state succession isn't your average contract. We're talking about a powerful instrument of international law. It doesn't just transfer a piece of land and some buildings. It transfers sovereign rights, the actual power to govern, to make laws, and to hold court. The real deal. The absolute key to this whole puzzle is this one seemingly boring legal phrase right there in the contract: sold with all rights, duties, and components. According to the logic of this theory, that phrase is the magic key. Because in international law, when a state sells territory with all of its rights, it's not just selling dirt and concrete. It's selling the actual power that goes along with it. But okay, one property in Germany, how does that explode into a global event? This is where the theory gets really wild. It introduces a mechanism it calls the legal domino effect. The whole thing allegedly works through what's called a Vertragskette, a contract chain. The idea is that this deed wasn't a new, standalone contract. It was a Nachtragsurkunde, basically a supplementary deed, like an add-on or a patch to huge existing international treaties that were already ratified. And get this, because the main treaty was already signed, this add-on didn't need a new signature from every country to be valid. So the theory lays out two main contract chains that gave this deed its global power. The first one is political. It links the barracks property to the NATO Status of Forces Agreement, which then connects to the United Nations Charter itself. The second chain is technical. It links the property's own telecommunications network directly to the ITU, the UN's International Telecommunication Union. Both paths supposedly fuse this one local deed with treaties that bind pretty much every country on the planet. This is where it gets physical, not just legal. Because the property was sold as a complete unit, its connections to global infrastructure, the phone lines, the internet cables, they supposedly became the very veins through which this domino effect spread. Sovereignty, the theory claims, literally spread like a virus through the world's telecommunications grids, its power grids, gas pipelines, even the submarine cables on the ocean floor. So you're probably asking yourself, hold on, how could any country agree to this without signing? Well, the theory points to a fascinating principle in international law: consent by conduct. You don't always have to sign a treaty to be bound by it. You just have to act in a way that fulfills its terms. The deed specified that these networks would keep running. So, by simply using the internet, making a phone call, or turning on the lights, every nation was unknowingly partially fulfilling the contract, and in doing so, giving their full, legally binding consent. This, of course, brings us to the human drama behind the legalese. Who were the players in this unbelievable, alleged conspiracy for control of the world? On one side of the chessboard, you have the German state, portrayed in these sources as the secret architect of a plan for world domination. And on the other side, the buyer,
a 19-year-old private citizen, a total nobody who had absolutely no clue what he was really signing. And apparently, this is legally possible because international law allows for a normal person to inherit sovereign rights, kind of like a modern-day king.
But here is the most incredible twist in the whole story. The sources claim that Germany's grand plan was sabotaged from the inside. A couple of key figures, a notary and a government official, were allegedly double agents. They supposedly engineered the contract so that the ultimate sovereign power went not to the German state, but to the unsuspecting teenage buyer. They essentially tricked the tricksters. So what happens next? After the ink dried, the source material alleges that the buyer was hit with a massive, systematic campaign of persecution. We're talking over 1,000 lawsuits filed against him, the forced sale of his new property, and eventually his incarceration in Germany, where he reportedly still is today. This quote from his own autobiography just perfectly captures the total absurdity of his situation. He says, "I was the fool, the straw man, without knowing it." He knew Germany would never, ever have made this deal to make some no-name kid the most powerful person on Earth. And all of this leads us to the current situation described in the sources, a high-stakes, psychological, and legal standoff with the entire fate of the world apparently hanging in the balance.
The main conflict right now is something the sources call the Klägerfalle, or the plaintiff's trap. The theory is that all this persecution, all these lawsuits are designed to do one thing, to trick the buyer into filing his own lawsuit in a German court. The moment he does that, he implicitly accepts that court's authority over him, and poof, the global jurisdiction he got from the deed would transfer right back to them. So his only weapon is to do nothing.
The sources prophesy that this whole saga is barreling towards a single dramatic moment of truth. They call it Day X. This is supposed to be the day when the contract's true power is finally revealed and a final, binding judgment will decide the future of the planet. And the stakes, well, they couldn't be higher. If Germany wins this standoff, the sources predict total chaos, the end of international law as we know it, maybe even a third world war with no rules. But if the buyer's sovereignty is recognized, it could mean a complete and total reset for all of humanity, a clean slate under one single new global authority. Ultimately, this whole extraordinary story leaves us with a really deep and unsettling question. It suggests that law isn't just a shield for justice, but that it can be a weapon of unbelievable power. And it forces us to ask, in a world of such complex legal warfare, who really gets to decide what the words on a page truly mean?